What is a scientific article, and how does it come into being? Let's begin this session with an example. Imagine I am a researcher at a road studies company. My question is simple. Do the newly installed speed bumps on highways actually reduce speed? To answer, I conduct a study on trucks and obtain specific results. Now imagine another researcher pursues the same question, but this time with passenger cars, and yet another tests the same scenario with motorcycles. 3 studies, 1 question, 3 results. If the results of these studies meet the necessary criteria, they can enter the process of scientific peer review and, after approval, be published in a reputable journal. Such a publication is what we call a research article, the product of a new question, a documented method, and formal dissemination. But sometimes, instead of posing a new question, a researcher gathers all past studies in a specific field, for example, speed bumps, analyzes and categorizes them, and publishes the findings as a scientific article for the purpose of education or decision-making. This is what we call a review article, the bringing together of multiple independent studies within a defined domain. The accumulation of such studies over the years can form the chapters of a scientific book. For instance, consider a physiology textbook, a chapter on the heart, a chapter on blood, a chapter on muscles. Each chapter is built from dozens of research and review articles placed side by side, like pieces of a scientific puzzle that together create a fuller picture of the field. When this body of evidence becomes sufficiently broad and robust, it reaches a higher stage, the development of guidelines. These guidelines, such as diabetes protocols or the health recommendations of the World Health Organization, are the outcome of years of research and expert consensus. They serve as guiding lights for scientific and practical decision-making at the societal level. So each time we say evidence shows that, we are in fact referring to a collection of studies, investigations published independently as research articles, compiled in reviews and books, and ultimately distilled into guidelines that illuminate the path of science and practice. In the previous section, we saw that scientific evidence is like bricks stacked together to build a solid wall, a wall that reflects the reliability of each study and helps us understand which findings can serve as the foundation for major decisions and which are merely initial clues. But scientific research is not limited to the classification of evidence. In another categorization, we divide studies into 2 groups: research within the scientific literature and research within the gray literature. Scientific literature is a collection of writings and research texts produced and published across different fields. Articles, critiques, cross-analyses, and new findings all belong to this body. These writings are usually published in reputable journals and present research results in a precise and documented way to the scientific community. In fact, scientific literature acts like a bridge that connects scientists, enabling them to access each other's achievements and build new projects upon them. Researchers always strive to register their work within this literature, because the process not only adds credibility to their research, but also creates a communication channel among scholars. Publishing findings in scientific journals provides an opportunity for others to use the results, offer critiques and feedback, and ultimately contribute to the advancement of knowledge. This exchange of information can lead to the formation of new theories and methods, allowing researchers to refine and improve their work. But the important question is, what kind of research belongs to the scientific literature? A study enters the scientific literature only when it goes through specific stages. If even one of these stages is missing, the research, though valuable, will not be part of the scientific literature. Nevertheless, such studies still remain within the broader classification of evidence. The collection of documents and scientific information that has not yet been published in official journals is called gray literature. Gray literature can be a valuable source of data and fresh insights that enrich research. In many cases, it even helps us identify research topics and gaps in existing studies. Many scientific documents, for various reasons, fall into one of these two categories: scientific literature or gray literature. In general, scientific literature. When an article possesses both the qualities of being documented and scientific and is published in a reputable journal, it is classified as part of the scientific literature. A documented work means it contains sources and evidence that support its claims and information. Documentation implies that the content is based on real data, research, and reliable references. Review articles, books, and guidelines, in addition to being built upon scientific articles, are themselves peer-reviewed and published, placing them at the top of the scientific literature. In contrast, documents that have not yet undergone formal peer review or have not been officially published fall into the category of gray literature. It is important to remember that being gray does not mean being invalid. Many of these documents can contain reliable and practical results. For example, theses and dissertations, though valuable, do not go through all the stages required to enter the scientific literature, and therefore are classified as gray literature. Or imagine a railway organization conducting scientific and practical research to solve a problem with train tracks, but keeping the results internal without formally publishing them. Such findings may be highly credible and useful, but since they are not publicly accessible and not peer-reviewed, they remain part of the informal or gray literature. Thus, researchers seeking a complete understanding of a subject must examine both scientific literature and gray literature, because each can provide important clues for advancing knowledge and initiating new studies. To better understand scientific and gray literature, we must first know what scientific review is and what types it includes. Scientific review is the process in which a paper or study is examined by specialists before publication to confirm its scientific validity. The most important type of review is peer review. That is, the research is evaluated by scholars in the same field of expertise. This type of review ensures that an article or paper is recognized as scientifically valid and can enter the scientific literature. In contrast, there is non-peer review. In this case, the work is examined by individuals who may not have precise expertise in that specific field. For example, theses and dissertations in universities are reviewed by professors, but since this review is not always peer-based and does not follow the formal process of scientific publication, their outputs do not enter the scientific literature and remain in gray literature. The key point is that gray literature may still undergo some form of review, but because this review is not formal and peer-based, it is not classified as part of the scientific literature. For instance, internal technical reports or projects reviewed by internal committees, though credible and useful, are not formally published or peer-reviewed, and therefore belong to gray literature. On the other hand, research and review articles published in reputable journals are clear examples of scientific literature because they are documented, scientific, and released through peer review. Guidelines also stand at the top of scientific literature, since they are developed based on systematic reviews of evidence and expert consensus. In contrast, short conference papers or technical reports, due to lighter or informal review processes, are often classified as gray literature. In this way, the boundary between scientific literature and gray literature becomes clear. A work enters the scientific literature only when it has three essential features. It is documented, it is scientific, and it is published in a reputable journal after peer review. Any writing that has not gone through this process, even if credible and useful, is placed in the category of gray literature. For a study to enter the scientific literature, it must begin with a specific question and objective. The researcher designs the research path, collects data, and ultimately reaches a result that undergoes peer review and, after approval, is published. This is the cycle that transforms a study into a scientific article. Yet one of the most common mistakes students make is that when given a research topic, they search and then return saying, "We couldn't find any articles." The reason for this often lies in unfamiliarity with gray literature. They limit their search only to official sources and overlook a large portion of data and reports that belong to gray literature. Notice that a significant part of research topics are hidden within gray literature. This section is always broader and can provide valuable clues for researchers. In fact, gray literature is like a hidden mine, sources that may not be formally published but can illuminate the research path and greatly contribute to completing the scientific picture. Now consider this. Is gray literature the same across all disciplines? For example, could it be that in computer engineering, conference papers are classified as scientific literature because of rigorous review and the high status of conferences, while in medicine or physiology, the same type of papers are regarded as preliminary reports and placed in gray literature? Do you think such a distinction is possible?